sulfur and gunpowder, a powerful stench that fills the air for miles, the unmistakable smell of battle. It lingers for days. Enzo looked up at the sky, laying on his back on the deck. He knew that smell all too well, as he'd been around cannons and flintlocks more than he cared to mention. The ship rocked back and forth as it traveled the sea, sailing for the port city of Palermo. He found the odor in the air to be quite troubling, as many of the other passengers went about their business unaware. After all, this was a simple passenger and trade ship. It was going about its normal day-to-day business, ferrying goods, people in need of transport. As he sat up, he looked around the ship and saw too many people to count, certainly in the hundreds. His hood fell as he stood to his feet to get a better look at his surroundings. Unsteady at first, he nearly forgot he was at sea. It took a moment to get his legs under him, but after he collected himself, he walked toward the starboard side. There was a bit of fog in the air, so it was difficult to see far. But they must be nearing the port by now. Mist from the seas coated the faces of the people aboard the ship. He stared for a moment, daydreaming a bit, when through the fog he noticed the port side of another ship coming towards them. Strange, he thought to himself. Why would another ship be this close to a passenger vessel? A good question indeed. Focusing on that approaching ship, he failed to notice that there was another ship approaching from the port side, and yet another off the stern. The fog was beginning to break as the ships drew closer, and in the distance, low-pitched thumps rumbled across the quiet, calm waters. The passengers aboard the other ships began to panic. They couldn't fathom why 3 ships were so near to their own. It was during this rising panic that Enzo began to realize the gravity of the situation. Small boarding ships were coming from other nearby boats. This was bad. Many of the passengers were too filled with worry to notice the impending boarding. The fog continued to lift. More ships began to appear from beyond the wall of mist. It was quickly looking like they were amidst an armada of ships. Enzo steadied himself and checked the weapons on his hip. It seemed to him that he would once again need the aid of his most trusted companion, his battle-worn rapier. Though not his weapon of choice, it had seen him through many tough times. The boat continued to rock, completely unaware of the looming danger. Enzo did his best to blend in with the flock of people frantically moving around the ship, but the deck was completely covered in horrified, anxious people, and Enzo was very much among them. He had been through a lot in his 28 years, but no matter how many times his life had been in danger, he still felt a twinge of fear in his core. Then it happened. Armored men, wielding swords and flintlocks, came aboard the unsuspecting ship. No one spoke. No one screamed. Everyone was frozen in terror. A man in silver ornate armor began to speak.
"Attention! I need all your attention now," he barked at these citizens as if they were new recruits in his brigade. "Our great king, Lorenzo Conti, has taken possession of this vessel, and now all those aboard it are henceforth subject to his sovereign rule of law. Our king is a just king, and will offer you a choice. You are to become prisoners or soldiers. It is your decision to make. If you are capable and wish to earn some coin, then you may join the ranks of soldiers of the great royal army and siege the city with us. If you cannot or will not fight for our king, then you shall be taken prisoner until further notice."
Lorenzo. That was a familiar name. Lorenzo was the man responsible for the latest attempt to conquer and unite the sovereign cities of Vecchio. He'd been more successful than any man before him. Maybe he really would be the one to bring this broken nation together. But for now, there was a choice to be made. Enzo knew what he had to do. He would fight, not for the king, but for his life, as he had so many times before. What is that horrible smell? Thought Illaria as she sat upright, legs crossed on top of a barrel of ale. Her fiery red hair was moving gently in the breeze as the ship sailed on, the moisture of the air clinging to her face. "It smells of rotten eggs. So strange," she said aloud, somewhat nonchalant. After which she quickly became small as she realized she'd spoken aloud. "I really must be more careful about my words," she thought silently to herself as she looked around nervously. No one had noticed her small outburst, and if they had, they really didn't pay it any attention. She'd been on the run for some time now. It seemed like a lifetime ago that she'd left the comforts of home. She noticed as a man in a black cloak stood up from the middle of the deck and walked towards the side of the boat. He seemed almost drunk in the way he lacked sea legs. She chuckled a bit to herself. It's always nice to see that I'm not the only one who doesn't have my shit together. She'd grown up quickly in the few years she'd been alone, but she still held on to some of her childish innocence about the world, which is why she didn't notice at first the people around her begin to mutter about boats. She had too much on her own mind to be worrying about what others were spouting off about. She had to find a place where she belonged, and that's why she was headed for Malermo. Sure, she was on the run, but not from anyone specific. She was running away from what she knew, toward the unknown, hoping to find warm, loving embrace in the arms of distant cities. The salty spray of the sea mixed with the strange smells brought her back outward from her thoughts, and it was then she saw the men come aboard. She was in complete shock. She'd never seen these men. Who were they? Who was this Lorenzo? And as the armored med said,
"Then you will be taken prisoner,"
she froze. What could she do? She was just a young girl. How could she possibly fight? But she certainly couldn't allow herself to be taken prisoner. If they found out what she was, they would surely kill her. Interesting. Smells of sulfur and gunpowder. Gorlami muttered under his breath as he jotted notes furiously in his book. "Quite fascinating indeed," he exclaimed aloud, causing nearby people to turn and look at him. He did not return their gazes, as he was far too deep in his work. He was working on his latest designs and could not afford any distractions. He was only hours, perhaps minutes from his first destination in the land of Vecchio, the city of Malermo. He knew just so many facts about Malermo. He began to become distracted by his own thoughts of the city. It was possibly the most fortified city in the world. It was built to withstand sieges lasting days, if not weeks. Fascinating architecture he would certainly study and sketch when he arrived. He was filled with excitement over the idea of examining these structures that were designed for such an impressive feat. Perhaps he would have a chat with his mentor about them when he arrived in the city to the south, Venya. He longed to return to the workshop of his mentor and friend, as he was the only other man he had met of a similar mindset. Gorlami did not vie for the recognition or fame. He only longed for his next invention. He would think of ideas for so long that he'd be unable to sleep. When he did sleep, he dreamt of even more new ideas. In fact, it was during his sleep that he had some of his best ideas, so he made sure to always have a book handy to write his dream inventions in upon waking. There were such a great many things Gorlami was looking forward to upon his arrival in Vecchio. It was his home, after all. He had learned so much abroad, he was bursting at the seams to share it with someone like his mentor who would truly appreciate his newfound knowledge. He'd been working feverishly on a new crossbow design, and a new cannon design, and a new dagger mechanism, and a new type of cart for a horse, and a new type of arrow. And at that moment, Gorlami's very interesting thoughts were interrupted by an armored rude man standing in front of him, exclaiming things he could just not be bothered with. Wait, what did that man just say? Prisoner or soldier? I can't create things if I'm dead or in prison. This is unacceptable, thought Gorlami. However, I'm certainly outnumbered here, so I will simply wait until a better opportunity presents itself. Thanks for watching and listening to our Tales from D&D. If you enjoy our narrative Dungeons & Dragons based stories, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest installment. And if you like this story, tap that like button.